I've figured out that you've been deceiving me all along. I want a divorce, and you better pay alimony." With a triumphant smile on his face, my husband declared this. I was stunned, as were my in-laws, who were there. I had many grievances with my husband, but I still tried to make it work. I thought I could push through, for the sake of our son. Yet, the man in front of me is blaming us for a crime I don't commit. I couldn't take it anymore. I was done with him. For the sake of our future, I'm going to cut him off. My name is Sarah, a 30-year-old housewife. I live with my husband. I have a baby in my belly. The due date is fast approaching. Since our marriage, I've lived away from my hometown and family. Though my in-laws have been kind and treated me like family, I still felt isolated. You hear stories about terrible mothers-in-law, but that wasn't my experience. Yet, I had my own troubles. My troubles were all about my husband. He worked for a regular company, but he often came home late. Sometimes he wouldn't come home until after midnight. Whenever I asked what he was doing, he would give me some vague excuse like, "Adults have a lot going on. Women have things to do too, you know." Because of this, I couldn't rely on him. Often, he wasn't home when I needed help. I had terrible morning sickness. Sometimes I couldn't move all day. Even then, he'd go out drinking late. Being a housewife, all the chores were my responsibility: cooking, laundry, cleaning. On days when I felt sick, I couldn't do it all, and sometimes I couldn't even take care of myself. Even when I was bedridden, there was no one to help. The loneliness was crushing my spirit. Even if it's hard to rely on us, we're here for you, Sarah. Don't hesitate to ask for help. Occasionally, my mill would visit our home and tell me so. Apparently, I looked quite ill. While I appreciated her words, they were still outsiders. I often worried about relying too much on them and causing trouble. In the end, I endured my loneliness and pain alone. One day, after many days like this, my body was in pain that day, but I had to take out the trash, so I whipped my heavy body into shape and went outside. The garbage bag felt unusually heavy, like it was filled with lead. Still, I had to do it, so I pushed myself. Because of that, I didn't watch my step, and tripped over a step. I couldn't break my fall, and collapsed. I knew I had to get up, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I must have been more exhausted than I realized. The desire to stay down overwhelmed me, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room. Apparently, a neighbor had called 911, and I was rushed to the hospital. After being monitored by the doctor, I was told I could go home after 3 days of observation. During that time, my husband didn't visit me at all. When I returned home, there he was, looking irritated. As soon as he saw me, he shouted, "Don't be a burden on me. You're a worthless wife." His words cut deep into my heart. To him, I was nothing but a nuisance, worthless as trash. Any normal husband would worry if he heard his wife had collapsed. Wouldn't it be normal to ask if I was all right? He never visited me even once while I was in the hospital. He had no idea how much anxiety I faced alone. That was when I realized I meant nothing to him. And I also realized that I had no love left for him. But inside me, there was a son who had no idea what was going on. When he's born, he'll need a father. We need money to live. Deciding on my own could limit my son's future. Maybe things would change once he was born. Maybe my husband would love him, even if he didn't care for me. I hoped for this with all my heart and decided not to get a divorce. But every night was filled with anxiety. I feared collapsing again and worried about our future. Dark thoughts swirled in my mind. I started suffering from insomnia. Even as I wasted away, my husband didn't care. Life was like hell, but despite it all, my son was born safely. Hearing his loud cries in the delivery room moved me to tears. It was also a relief after all the anxious days. I stayed in the hospital for a while, but my husband still didn't visit. Even during this time, his job came first. I wanted him by my side. But my in-laws visited often, sometimes bringing my husband along. He looked very displeased, like he wanted to leave immediately. Seeing this, Mimo scolded him, "You're a father, you know. Don't restrict my feelings." He completely ignored his Mill's words. What kind of man was this? Why did I ever fall for him? Why did I marry this piece of trash? I deeply regretted it. After being discharged and returning home, my husband, as expected, didn't help with the baby. Though I no longer had the weight of pregnancy, balancing childcare and housework was more challenging than I imagined. My son cried a lot at night, leaving me with very little sleep and no time to rest. I can't take it anymore. I wanted to escape. One day, my husband said, "We need to talk. Soon, I want to have an important conversation. I want my parents there too." I was curious about this important conversation, but I agreed since there was no point in refusing. That day, my husband was in a very good mood, holding his phone close. I had a bad feeling. A few days later, the appointed day arrived. The doorbell rang, and my in-laws came up. They seemed unaware of the topic and were hopeful it was good news. As we took our seats, my husband placed a sheet of paper on the table. "I want you to look at this," he said. We all leaned in to look at the paper. It appeared to be the results of a DNA test. The results indicated that there was no parent-child relationship between my husband and our son. "This child isn't mine," he said that, glaring at me. "But our son is definitely his child." Even though I insisted, he wouldn't listen. "I've figured out that you've been deceiving me all along. I want a divorce, and you better pay alimony." I was stunned. My in-laws were equally shocked by this unexpected turn of events. I thought we could finally have a proper conversation, but instead, this is what I got. Sure, my son and I had benefited from his earnings, but that didn't justify his attitude. At that moment, I decided I would get my revenge. "Fine, can I call this hospital to verify?" When I said this, my husband turned pale. "Even with all this evidence, you still want to fight? I just want to confirm if this is real. To me, at least, our son is your child." From his reaction, it was clear that the test results were probably fake. Ignoring my husband's attempts to stop me, I called the contact number on the paper. A receptionist answered and checked the records. It turned out no DNA test had been done. My husband insisted, "This is some mistake," refusing to accept the truth. He kept claiming that I was lying. "She's trying to set me up." That's what my husband says, and he treats me like a bad person. I regretted not realizing sooner that I shouldn't have tried to make things work with him. I thought that even if he was a terrible husband, he might change once our son was born. I wanted to believe he would be a good father. But looking back, that was never going to happen. It was pointless to expect anything from someone who only thought about himself. It felt like I had finally woken up from a long dream. I realized he was unnecessary in my life. Now, it was my turn to present my papers. Both my husband and in-laws tilted their heads when they saw the brown envelope I had placed on the table. "This is proof of your infidelity," I said. When I said that, my husband started to panic. It was obvious he knew exactly what I was talking about. Ignoring him, I opened the envelope and took out the contents. There were numerous photos. It was a photo of my husband flirting with another woman. Some of them were photographed going in and out of hotels, so they cannot deny it. "I had my suspicions about you for a while. So, I had you investigated." I had doubted him for some time. He was coming home late, which I could not understand on the grounds that he was working overtime, and he suddenly started going out drinking with his workmates. I was scared to find out the truth, so I hesitated to investigate. But one day, while he was in the shower, his phone on the table buzzed with a message. It was from a woman named Jessica, saying, "I can't wait to see you again." I impulsively picked up his phone. Fortunately, the phone wasn't locked, so I could see what I needed right away. Once I confirmed the affair, I hired a private investigator to look into my husband. The photo of the phone screen would also serve as strong evidence, they said. Soon after, photos of my husband enjoying time with another woman arrived in my hands. "You were deceiving me." My husband, his face red with anger, yelled at me, and I retorted, "You're the one who was deceiving me." He tried to defend himself, saying, "But this is too much and this isn't fair." But his words no longer hurt me. I felt no love for this man anymore. No matter what he said, it didn't bother me. I just wanted this moment to be over. My husband continued to shout in anger. The more I didn't respond, the more he raged. "You can't live without me. You should have just listened to me." As I let his words wash over me, my Phil stood up, yelling, "You idiot!" My in-laws, who had been silently watching, now turned red with anger and confronted him. "How could you do something so outrageous? Poor Sarah, we didn't raise you to be this way." Apologize to Sarah. When they scolded him, my husband tried to make excuses, but they shouted, "No excuses." Finally, half in tears, he muttered, "I'm sorry." Urged by his parents, he knelt at my feet. "I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me." His pathetic demeanor was a stark contrast to his earlier attitude. My in-laws said, "You don't have to forgive him," and I decided not to. "Let's get a divorce. I'll be seeking alimony." My husband tried to object, but his parents' stern glares made him reluctantly agree. Afterward, my in-laws also knelt before me. "We're sorry for our foolish son. We'll make sure he makes amends. We're sorry for all the suffering you've endured. We hope you'll be happy from now on." They were so different from their son that I almost doubted they were truly related. My husband remained kneeling the whole time. Finally, I was able to divorce him. When I handed him the divorce papers, he signed without resistance. I had consulted with a lawyer, so we thoroughly discussed the alimony. Given the evidence and my insomnia, the alimony amount was substantial. I also identified his mistress and demanded alimony from her as well. Afterward, I returned to my parents' home to relax and recuperate. Of course, my son came with me. There was no way I was letting my ex-husband have custody. He agreed to pay child support, which would help raise our son. Though I had worried for a long time, the end came swiftly. I secretly regretted not taking action sooner. Later, I heard that my ex-husband was dumped by his mistress. It seems she had gotten pregnant and demanded marriage, which prompted his divorce. My ex-husband, thinking he should take responsibility, chose her after she announced her pregnancy. But it turned out the child wasn't his. The mistress had been seeing other men, and the child likely belonged to one of them. She knew this but tried to use my ex-husband to make her life easier. However, when she realized she would have to pay alimony, she ran away. My ex-husband was serious about marrying her, and the shock was significant. He stopped going to work and became a recluse at his parents' house. Naturally, my ex-in-laws couldn't support their reclusive son forever. They easily abandoned him, and now he works at a factory, living on a meager wage. "I can't do this anymore. Please, help me." One day, I got a call from an unknown number, and it was my ex-husband. It seems he borrowed a friend's phone to call me. "I realize I can't live without you. I'll change my ways, so please come back." I sighed in disbelief at his desperate pleading. How could he claim he couldn't live without me? Even if I helped him now, he'd betray me again eventually. He cried and begged on the other end of the line. In a cold voice, I told him, "I'm sorry, but I have no intention of getting back together with you. Don't ever contact me again. If you try anything, I'll consult my lawyer again." He shouted, "Wait," but I ignored him and hung up. He called repeatedly from the same number, but I blocked it. I decided to go to a cell phone store one of these days. I wanted to upgrade my phone anyway, so this might be a good time to get a new one. As for me, I got a job at a company nearby. There's a great daycare near my parents' house, where I leave my son. On busy days, I rely on my parents, but my coworkers understand my situation, so I rarely stay late. I can spend time with my son and save for our future. I cherish my son deeply. No matter what path he chooses in life, I want to support him wholeheartedly. If he ever goes astray like his father, I want to do everything I can as his mother. Hurting others without remorse is wrong, and not feeling guilty about it is even worse. Everyone makes mistakes. I'm sure my son will too. That's why, as his mother, I want to teach him always to be